The Swiss watch marked exactly 7 o'clock in the morning when Maximilian Blackwood adjusted the cuffs of his custom-made Italian shirt. His routine was as flawless as everything else in his life. Wake up at 6:30, 15 minutes of stretching, an 8-minute shower, balanced breakfast prepared by his personal chef. At 32, Max had transformed discipline into an art form and emotions into something completely unnecessary. His penthouse apartment in Manhattan reflected his personality: straight lines, neutral colors, expensive furniture, and no sign of human warmth. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of the city he dominated in business, but which had never touched his heart, because Max Blackwood had learned long ago that hearts were for the weak. "Mr. Blackwood," Helena's voice, his assistant, echoed through the intercom. "Mr. Fitzgerald has arrived for the 8 o'clock meeting." Max frowned. Fitzgerald never arrived early. In fact, the old family lawyer usually delayed on purpose, claiming that excessive punctuality demonstrates having nothing to do. Something was wrong. Send him up. When the elevator doors opened, James Fitzgerald looked like he had aged 10 years since their last meeting. His hands trembled slightly as he held a worn leather briefcase, and his eyes avoided direct contact. "James." Max gestured to the leather armchair across from his desk. "You look terrible." "Health problems?" "Not exactly." The lawyer settled in, taking a deep breath. "Max, I need to tell you something I should have said years ago. Something about your grandfather's will." Max raised an eyebrow. Augustus Blackwood had died 5 years ago, leaving his grandson an empire valued in billions. The will had been read, assets transferred, case closed. The will was executed perfectly, James. What are you talking about? There was a clause, a condition that I kept secret by express order from Augustus. Fitzgerald opened the briefcase with trembling hands. He knew you would refuse to comply, so he instructed me to reveal it only when absolutely necessary. Max's blood ran cold. Augustus Blackwood was known for his manipulative maneuvers, but interfering beyond death was low, even for him. "What kind of clause?" "You need to get married, Max, and remain married for at least 1 year. If you don't fulfill this condition by your 33rd birthday," Fitzgerald made a painful pause, "you lose everything. The company, the properties, the bank accounts. Everything will be donated to charity." The silence that followed was deafening. Max felt as if the ground had opened beneath his feet. 33rd birthday. That gave him exactly 6 months. "This is impossible," he murmured, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. "You can't be serious." I tried to argue with him at the time, but Augustus was determined. He believed that only true love could save the Blackwood family soul. Fitzgerald handed over a copy of the document. "I'm sorry, Max. I truly am." Max read the words on paper, but they seemed to be in a foreign language. Mary, he who had dedicated his entire life to avoiding any form of emotional involvement, who saw marriage as an antiquated institution for weak people. "And if I refuse? Then in 6 months you'll be just another ordinary citizen of New York, trying to pay rent like anyone else." The irony was cruel. Max had built his entire identity around power, control, independence, and now his own grandfather was forcing him to do the one thing he considered unacceptable: depend on another person. "Is there any flexibility in the terms? The union needs to be legal and last at least 12 months. After that, you can divorce if you wish. But during that period," Fitzgerald hesitated, "you need to live together, like a real couple." Max stood up abruptly, walking to the window. Down below, the city teemed with millions of people living their insignificant lives. Among them, he would need to find a woman willing to marry a stranger for money. The idea disgusted him. "How much time do I have to decide?" "The clause is clear. You need to be married before your 33rd birthday. That gives you 6 months to find a wife." 6 months. Max had closed more complex deals in less time, but this was different. It involved human emotions, unpredictability, chaos, everything he had spent his life avoiding. After Fitzgerald left, Max was alone with his thoughts. For the first time in years, he felt truly lost. He could hire an actress, of course. Pay someone to pretend for a year. But something about the way his grandfather had structured the clause suggested the old man had anticipated this possibility. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Mr. Blackwood, there's a young woman downstairs who insists on speaking with you. She says it's about the housekeeper position at your Hamptons property. I told her we didn't have any vacancy, but she—" Helena paused. "She's quite insistent." Max frowned. He hadn't placed any ad for a housekeeper, but something about the stranger's persistence sparked his curiosity. On a day full of unpleasant surprises, maybe a distraction would be welcome. Send her up. He had no idea that this impulsive decision would change his life forever. 15 minutes later, the elevator doors opened to reveal the woman who would transform Maximilian Blackwood's perfectly ordered world into something completely unrecognizable. And when their eyes met for the first time, neither he nor she could imagine that this apparently casual encounter was the first step of a journey that would test everything they believed they knew about love, sacrifice, and redemption. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and Maximilian Blackwood's world shifted on its axis without him even realizing it. She stepped out clutching a worn leather purse against her chest, her dark hair escaping from what had probably started as a neat bun that morning. Her dress, a simple navy blue piece that had seen better days, was wrinkled from what appeared to be a long journey. But it was her eyes that caught him off guard. Large, expressive, and filled with a determination that seemed to illuminate her entire face. "Mr. Blackwood?" Her voice carried a slight tremor, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "I'm Isabel Hartwell. I'm here about the housekeeper position." Max studied her for a moment, his analytical mind automatically cataloging details. Mid-20s, probably. Nervous, but trying to hide it. Definitely not from New York. There was something softer about her accent, maybe Southern, and absolutely undeniably beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with designer clothes or professional styling. "Miss Hartwell," he said coolly, settling back into his chair without offering her a seat. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. I haven't advertised for any household staff." Her face fell for just a moment before the determination returned. "The agency said—" "What agency?" "Sterling Domestic Services. They said you specifically requested someone with experience in historic home management." She fumbled in her purse, producing a crumpled piece of paper. "I have the reference number right here." Max glanced at the paper, recognizing nothing. Either this was an elaborate scam, or someone had made a significant error. Given the morning he'd had, he was leaning toward cosmic conspiracy. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake, Miss Hartwell. Please." The word escaped her lips before she could stop it, and color flooded her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I know this is unprofessional, but I really need this job. I drove 16 hours from Georgia with my last $200 and I—" She stopped abruptly, as if realizing she'd revealed too much. Something in her desperation tugged at a place in Max's chest he'd forgotten existed. He pushed the feeling away irritably. "That's unfortunate, but I can't create a position that doesn't exist. What if you could?" She stepped forward, her eyes brightening. "I mean, you have this beautiful penthouse, and I'm sure your Hamptons house is magnificent. Places like these require constant care. I have 5 years of experience managing Thornwood Manor, one of Georgia's oldest estates. I can provide references." Max found himself oddly intrigued despite his annoyance. "Thornwood Manor?" "The Ashworth family estate. I've been their head housekeeper since I was 21. Pride crept into her voice. "I managed a staff of 12 and maintained 43 rooms, including priceless antiques and—" She stopped again, biting her lower lip. "And why did you leave this prestigious position to drive 16 hours for a job that doesn't exist?" The question hit its mark. Isabel's composure cracked, and for a moment, Max glimpsed something raw and painful in her expression. "The family sold the estate," she said quietly. "New owners brought their own staff. I had 2 weeks' notice." There was more to the story. Max could read people well enough to know that. but something about her vulnerability made him uncomfortable. He wasn't equipped to handle other people's emotional baggage. "Miss Hartwell, I sympathize with your situation, but I'll work for half the standard rate for the first 3 months to prove my worth," she interrupted desperately. "I'll sign any contract, pass any background check, I can start today." Her desperation was palpable, and Max found himself studying her more carefully. She was clearly educated. Her speech was refined despite the slight accent. Her clothes were worn but well maintained. Everything about her suggested someone who had fallen on hard times through no fault of her own. And then, like lightning, an insane idea struck him. He needed a wife. She needed a job. Both problems could theoretically solve each other, though the very thought made his skin crawl. Marriage as a business transaction was one thing, but with someone this genuine? This emotional? "Miss Hartwell," he said slowly, "what if I told you I had a different proposition? One that would solve your financial problems permanently?" Hope flared in her eyes. "I'd listen to anything at this point." Max stood, moving to the window to avoid looking at her directly. What he was about to suggest went against every instinct he had, but desperate times called for desperate measures. "I need a wife." The words hung in the air like a challenge. When he turned back, Isabel was staring at him as if he'd grown a second head. "I'm sorry. What?" "I need to be married within 6 months, or I lose everything. It's a contractual obligation." He kept his voice clinical, businesslike. "The arrangement would be purely financial. You'd receive a substantial sum for your participation, and after 1 year, we'd divorce amicably." Isabel sank into the chair he hadn't offered earlier, her face pale. Are you proposing to me?" "I'm offering you a business arrangement that would benefit us both significantly. We just met, which makes it perfect. No emotional complications." Max returned to his desk, pulling out his checkbook. "I'll pay you $50,000 now as a good faith gesture, and $2 million upon completion of the contract terms." $2 million. The number hit Isabel like a physical blow. She could pay off her student loans, help her sick father, maybe even buy the little house she'd been dreaming of. But marriage to a stranger? A cold, arrogant stranger who talked about wives like business investments? "This is insane," she whispered. "It's practical. It's crazy. It's mutually beneficial." She looked up at him, this impossibly handsome man with his perfect suit and emotionless eyes, and realized he was completely serious. He really thought this was a reasonable proposal. What kind of man suggests marriage as a business transaction to someone he met 10 minutes ago? The kind who's about to lose $1 billion empire if he doesn't find a solution quickly. The honesty in his answer surprised her. For just a moment, the mask slipped and she saw something vulnerable underneath. Fear, maybe. Panic. And what kind of woman would even consider it, she found herself asking. Max looked at her directly for the first time since she'd arrived. The kind who's desperate enough to drive 16 hours for a job that doesn't exist. The truth of it hit her like ice water. She was that desperate. And maybe, just maybe, he was desperate enough to treat her fairly. "I need time to think." "You have until 5 o'clock today. After that, I'm exploring other options." Isabel stood on unsteady legs, clutching her purse like a lifeline. At the elevator, she turned back. "Mr. Blackwood, what happens if we can't stand each other?" For the first time since she'd arrived, something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. "Miss Hartwell, I don't particularly like anyone. You'll fit right in." As the elevator doors closed between them, neither Maximilian nor Isabel realized that in the span of 20 minutes, they had just negotiated the terms of their salvation, and quite possibly, their destruction. Isabel stumbled out of the Blackwood Tower into the chaotic symphony of Manhattan, her mind reeling from the most insane conversation of her life. Marriage. To a stranger. For money. She found herself in Central Park without remembering how she'd gotten there, settling onto a bench near the lake where mothers pushed strollers and joggers swept past like they inhabited a normal world. A world where billionaires didn't propose marriage to desperate housekeepers. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. Izzy, honey, insurance denied the latest treatment. Don't worry about me. Focus on finding work. Love you. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen. The experimental treatment cost $30,000. Money she didn't have. Money Maximilian Blackwood could provide with the stroke of a pen. This is crazy, she whispered to a passing pigeon. But was it? She'd grown up reading fairy tales where peasant girls married princes. Of course, those princes usually fell in love first. Maximilian Blackwood seemed incapable of feeling anything warmer than mild irritation. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Hartwell? This is Helena Reeves, Mr. Blackwood's assistant. He'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting at 4:30 to discuss contract details should you be interested in his proposal. Contract details. God, he really meant it. I haven't decided yet. Of course. He also wanted me to inform you that he's arranged for you to meet with James Fitzgerald, his family attorney, to review the legal implications independently. Mr. Blackwood insists you have proper representation before making any decision. Isabel blinked in surprise. That was considerate? Unexpected from the cold man who'd offered to buy her like a vintage car. Why would he do that? Mr. Blackwood may be many things, Miss Hartwell, but he's always fair in his business dealings. Business dealings. Is that what this was? At 3 o'clock, Isabel sat across from James Fitzgerald in his wood-paneled office, feeling like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole. It's highly unusual, the elderly lawyer admitted, adjusting his glasses, but legally sound. The prenuptial agreement protects both parties. You'd receive the agreed-upon compensation, regardless of who initiates divorce proceedings after the required year. And if he changes his mind, decides he doesn't want to go through with it, you keep the $50,000 signing bonus. No questions asked. Isabel stared at the contract. Page after page of legal jargon that basically boiled down to, pretend to be married for money. Mr. Fitzgerald, can I ask you something? Of course. What kind of man is he? Really? The lawyer leaned back, considering. Maximilian is complicated. Brilliant, certainly. Ruthless when necessary. But I've watched him donate millions to charity anonymously. He put his assistant's daughter through college without her ever knowing where the tuition money came from. He paused. His grandfather broke something in him long ago. Perhaps this strange arrangement might begin to fix it. Or it might break us both. Miss Hartwell, in my experience, people aren't broken by taking chances. They're broken by not taking them. At 4:25, Isabel stood outside Maximilian's office, her reflection wavering in the polished elevator doors. She'd changed into her one good dress, black, simple, the kind that could take her from job interviews to funerals with equal appropriateness. How fitting. Mr. Blackwood will see you now. Helena smiled warmly, as if marriage proposals were just another Tuesday. Max stood silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't turn when she entered. Have you made your decision, Miss Hartwell? I have questions first. Of course you do. Now he turned, and she was struck again by how devastatingly handsome he was, and how completely untouchable. Ask. Why me? You could hire anyone. A professional actress, a socialite who needs money, someone who actually fits in your world. Because you're desperate enough to say yes, but decent enough not to betray me later. His honesty was brutal. And because you have no connections to my social circle, no hidden agendas. That's flattering. It's practical. She walked closer, studying his face. What aren't you telling me about this inheritance clause? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What makes you think there's more? Because men like you don't just accept ultimatums. You fight them. Unless, she tilted her head, unless you've already tried everything else. For a moment something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe even respect. You're more perceptive than I expected. That's not an answer. Max moved to his desk, pouring 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher. My grandfather wasn't just manipulative, Miss Hartwell. He was vindictive. If I don't fulfill his conditions exactly, the money doesn't just disappear. It goes to my cousin Marcus. And that's bad because Marcus would destroy everything my grandfather built within 5 years. Every employee, every innovation, every piece of good the company has done. His voice hardened. 1,200 families depend on Blackwood Industries for their livelihoods. I won't let them suffer because of an old man's sick game. There it was. Not greed, but responsibility. Underneath the cold exterior, Maximilian Blackwood actually cared about something other than himself. So you're not doing this for the money. I'm doing it to keep the money away from someone who would abuse it. Isabel set down her untouched water glass. I'll do it. The words hung between them like a bridge burning. Just like that? My father needs surgery that insurance won't cover. You need a wife to save your company. It's practical, right? She tried to mirror his emotionless tone but couldn't quite manage it. Max studied her for a long moment. There are conditions. We'll live together as husband and wife would appear to live. Separate bedrooms but public appearances together. You'll attend business functions, charity galas. Can you handle that? Can you handle being married to someone who actually has opinions and emotions? We'll find out. He opened his desk drawer, withdrawing a small velvet box that made her heart stutter stupidly. We'll need to make this look convincing. The ring was stunning. A vintage emerald surrounded by diamonds that caught the afternoon light like captured stars. It was also probably worth more than she'd make in 10 years. It was my grandmother's, he said quietly. She was the only person in my family who understood love. For just a moment his mask slipped completely, and Isabel saw the boy he must have been before the world taught him that feelings were weaknesses. Max, she said softly, using his first name for the first time. Are you sure about this? He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that were surprisingly gentle. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Miss Hartwell, Isabel, I've never been sure about anything involving emotions. But I'm sure about this. We can help each other. She looked down at the ring, then up at the man who was about to become her husband. When? Tomorrow. I've arranged for a private ceremony. Tomorrow? She nearly choked. That's impossible. I don't have a dress or flowers or... It's a business arrangement, remember, we don't need the fairy tale. But looking at the ring on her finger, feeling the weight of it, Isabel couldn't help thinking that maybe, just maybe, fairy tales started in the most unexpected ways. All right, she whispered. Tomorrow. As Maximilian Blackwood shook hands with his soon-to-be wife, sealing their impossible bargain, neither realized they had just agreed to the most dangerous contract of their lives, one that would demand not just their signatures, but their hearts. Isabel stared at her reflection in the boutique mirror, barely recognizing herself. The ivory silk dress Helena had somehow procured overnight fit like it had been made for her, simple yet elegant with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing skirt that whispered against her legs. You look beautiful, Helena said softly, fastening a strand of pearls around Isabel's neck. These were Mr. Blackwood's grandmother's as well. Why is he letting me wear her jewelry? Isabel touched the pearls reverently. Helena's smile was cryptic. Perhaps you should ask him. The morning had been surreal. She'd awakened in a suite at the Plaza Hotel, Max's doing, of course, with an entire team of stylists waiting to transform her into a suitable Blackwood bride. Hair swept into an elegant chignon, makeup subtle but flawless, nails manicured to perfection. She looked like she belonged in his world, even if she felt like an imposter. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. Good luck with the job interview today, sweetheart. I know you'll be perfect. If only he knew she was getting married instead of interviewed. The guilt gnawed at her, but the money for his surgery would transfer tonight. She was saving his life, even if she had to lie to do it. The courthouse wedding was everything a romantic ceremony wasn't. Sterile, efficient, emotionless. Max stood beside her in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, his face a mask of polite indifference. Only Isabel seemed to notice how his hands trembled slightly when he slipped the platinum wedding band onto her finger. Do you, Maximilian Augustus Blackwood, take Isabel Marie Hartwell to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. His voice was steady, but something flickered in his eyes when he looked at her. Do you, Isabel Marie Hartwell, take Maximilian Augustus Blackwood to be your lawfully wedded husband? Isabel's throat felt desert dry. This was it, the point of no return. I do. You may kiss the bride. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Max stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face with surprising gentleness. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat the clinical transaction fell away. His lips touched hers, soft, warm, achingly brief. But in that moment, Isabel felt something shift, like tectonic plates rearranging deep beneath the surface of their arrangement. When they broke apart, Max's composure had returned, but she caught him touching his lips unconsciously. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, the judge smiled. Mrs. Blackwood. Isabel had a new name, a new life, and absolutely no idea what came next. The ride to Max's penthouse was silent except for the whisper of expensive leather and the distant hum of Manhattan traffic. Isabel twisted her wedding rings nervously, the unfamiliar weight both thrilling and terrifying. Are you having second thoughts? Max's voice was carefully neutral. Are you? I don't allow myself second thoughts, they're counterproductive. That must be exhausting, she said softly. Never questioning yourself. He turned to study her profile. You think I should question this decision? I think questioning things is how we grow. She met his gaze. But then again, I've made plenty of questionable decisions lately, including marrying me. The vulnerability in his question surprised them both. Isabel saw past his mask again, glimpsing the uncertainty he worked so hard to hide. Ask me in a year. Something that might have been relief flickered across his features. The penthouse felt different when they entered as husband and wife, more intimate somehow despite its cathedral ceilings and museum-like perfection. Helena had left champagne and roses in the living room, touches of warmth in Max's sterile sanctuary. Your room is down the hall, Max said, suddenly awkward. Helena had your things moved from the hotel, if you need anything. Max. She touched his arm, feeling him tense beneath the expensive fabric. We're married now. We should probably learn to be comfortable with each other. Comfortable. He repeated the word like it was foreign. I'm not particularly good at comfortable. I noticed. A smile tugged at her lips. Lucky for you, I'm good enough at it for both of us. For the first time since she'd met him, Maximilian Blackwood laughed. A real laugh, rich and warm and completely unexpected. The sound transformed his face, making him look younger, more human. What? Isabel asked, pleased with herself. I was just thinking how my grandfather would react to this conversation. He spent decades trying to make me more personable. It took him less than a day to find someone who could actually succeed. He didn't find me. You did. Did I? Max moved to the window, hands in his pockets. Sometimes I wonder if she found me instead. The admission hung between them, more intimate than their brief wedding kiss. Isabel joined him at the window, careful to maintain distance while offering silent companionship. The city looks different from up here, she said. Everything looks different from a distance. Cleaner. Less complicated. But less real, too. He glanced at her. You prefer complicated? I prefer honest. Complicated usually means there's something worth fighting for underneath. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over Manhattan. Somewhere in the quiet moments, the awkwardness began to fade. They were strangers, yes, but strangers with a year to figure each other out. Isabel? Yes? Thank you, for today, for this. She looked at him, her husband, this brilliant, damaged man who thought kindness was a business transaction, and felt something dangerous blooming in her chest. Thank you for trusting me with your grandmother's ring. She would have liked you. His voice was soft, almost wondering. She used to say that the right person could bring out the best in anyone if they were patient enough. Was she patient? Endlessly, with everyone except my grandfather. A ghost of a smile played at his lips. She used to say he was her most challenging project. Did she succeed? In the end, yes. He died holding her hand, whispering apologies for all the years he'd been too proud to say he loved her. The story settled between them like a promise. Isabel felt the weight of it, the hope and warning intertwined. Max? What happens tomorrow, when we wake up married to each other? He turned from the window, his expression serious. Tomorrow we learn how to live with the most impulsive decision either of us has ever made. And if we're terrible at it, then we'll be terrible together. It's still better than being terrible alone. As wedding vows went, it wasn't particularly romantic. But looking into his eyes, Isabel thought it might be the most honest thing anyone had ever said to her. Outside, the city sparkled like scattered diamonds, witness to the beginning of the most unlikely love story neither of them saw coming. In the quiet of their first evening as husband and wife, Maximilian and Isabel Blackwood stood on the precipice of something neither had planned for, the terrifying possibility that their marriage of convenience might become inconveniently real. Isabel woke to the sound of classical music drifting through the penthouse and the rich aroma of coffee. For a disorienting moment she forgot where she was, until the enormous emerald on her finger caught the morning light, reminding her that yesterday hadn't been an elaborate dream. She was married to a billionaire, who was apparently an early riser. Following the sense, she found Max in the kitchen, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, reading financial reports while his chef prepared breakfast. He looked up when she entered, his eyes taking in her silk pajamas and tousled hair with an unreadable expression. "Good morning, wife." The word sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "Good morning, husband." Chef Martinez beamed at them both. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood. I've prepared a special wedding breakfast, Belgian waffles with fresh berries, eggs Benedict, and my grandmother's coffee cake." Isabel's stomach growled appreciatively. "That sounds incredible, but I usually just have toast." "Today is not usual," Max interrupted quietly. "Today you're a Blackwood." Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. Was he reminding her of her new status, or trying to convince himself this was real? They ate in surprisingly comfortable silence, the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Isabel found herself studying her husband's profile, noting how he seemed more relaxed at home, less like the corporate shark she'd first met. "What's your schedule like today?" she asked, sipping the best coffee she'd ever tasted. "Board meeting at 9, lunch with investors, conference call with Tokyo at 4. He paused. "What about you?" The question caught her off guard. In her old life, no one asked about her schedule. She just cleaned houses and went home to an empty apartment. "I don't really have one anymore. I should probably find a job." "You have a job. You're my wife." "That's not a job, Max. That's a situation." He set down his coffee cup, studying her. "What did you do before, besides housekeeping?" "I have a degree in art history. I worked at a small gallery in Savannah before." She trailed off, unwilling to share that particular heartbreak yet. Before what? Before life got complicated. Max recognized the deflection. He was a master of it himself. "There's a gallery district in Chelsea. You might find it interesting." "Is that your way of getting rid of me for the day?" "It's my way of suggesting you explore your new city." His tone was carefully neutral, but she caught something softer underneath. "Unless you prefer to stay here and learn Helena's filing system." Despite everything, Isabel laughed. "Art galleries it is." That afternoon, Max found himself distracted during his investor lunch, checking his phone more frequently than usual. Isabel had been sending him photos, candid shots of street art, her reflection in gallery windows, a ridiculous sculpture that made her laugh. Each message was a small intrusion into his ordered world, and he was surprised to find he didn't mind. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo of her sitting in Washington Square Park, feeding pigeons with an expression of pure contentment. "Your city is growing on me. How was your meeting?" Max stared at the message. When was the last time someone had asked about his day just to know, not because they wanted something from him? Productive. How are the galleries? Amazing. Found a small exhibit about marriage traditions around the world. Very educational for a new bride. The emoji was so quintessentially her. Warm, genuine, unafraid of showing emotion. Everything he wasn't. Mr. Blackwood? His investor's voice cut through his thoughts. About the quarterly projections? Max tucked his phone away, but the image of Isabel's smile lingered. When he arrived home that evening, he found her in the kitchen with Martinez, both of them laughing over something in a cookbook. She'd changed into jeans and a simple sweater, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. She looked domestic. It should have terrified him. "Welcome home," she said, and the casual warmth in her voice did something strange to his chest. "You're cooking?" "Attempting to. Martinez is very patient with hopeless cases." "Mrs. Blackwood is natural," Martinez protested. "She just needs practice." The chef's easy acceptance of Isabel as part of the household struck Max as significant. His staff was typically reserved, professional. But Isabel had somehow charmed his way past their defenses in less than 24 hours. "How was your day?" she asked, stirring something that smelled incredible. "Long." He loosened his tie, then caught himself. When had he started relaxing in front of her? "How are the galleries?" "Inspiring. There's this amazing exhibition on love letters throughout history. Some of them are heartbreaking." She paused, glancing at him. "Did your grandparents write to each other?" "Constantly. My grandfather kept every letter she ever sent him." Max found himself moving closer, drawn by the warmth radiating from both the stove and the woman beside it. "Why?" "I was thinking about what makes a marriage real. Is it the ceremony, the legal documents, or is it the small moments when people choose each other every day?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to address. "For my grandparents, it was the choosing," he said finally. "Every morning for 43 years. That sounds exhausting. Or rewarding, depending on who you're choosing." Their eyes met across the small space, and Max felt that dangerous shift again, the same feeling from their wedding kiss, like standing on the edge of a cliff. "Max?" Her voice was softer now, uncertain. "Are we going to be okay? This arrangement, I mean." He studied her face, the gentle concern, the hope she tried to hide, the strength that had brought her to his office in the first place. "I think," he said slowly, "we might surprise ourselves. Good surprise or bad surprise? I'm not sure there's a difference anymore." Martinez cleared his throat diplomatically. "Dinner is ready. Should I serve in the dining room?" "Here is fine," Isabel said quickly. "If that's okay with you, Max?" Max looked at his pristine dining room with its formal table for 12, then at the cozy kitchen island where his wife had spent the afternoon learning to cook. The choice seemed symbolic somehow. Here is perfect. As they sat down to their first home-cooked meal together, Max realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just a business arrangement anymore. Somewhere between her morning laughter and evening questions about love letters, Isabel had begun the slow, terrifying process of making herself at home in his life. And against all logic, all self-preservation instincts, he was letting her. Over pasta and wine, as evening shadows lengthened across Manhattan, Maximilian Blackwood began to understand that the most dangerous clause in his grandfather's will wasn't the one about marriage. It was the one about living together, day after day, until pretense became impossible and convenience transformed into something far more complicated. "You look stunning." Isabel turned from the mirror to find Max in the doorway of her room, devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo. 3 weeks of marriage had made such moments less jarring, but her pulse still quickened when he looked at her like that, like he was seeing her for the first time. "Thank you." She smoothed the midnight blue gown Helena had selected for tonight's charity gala. "Are you sure I can pull this off? I've never been to anything like this." "You'll be perfect." His certainty surprised her. "Just be yourself." Myself got kicked out of the country club back home for suggesting they donate leftover food to shelters instead of throwing it away. Max's mouth curved into what she'd learned to recognize as his almost smile. Then definitely be yourself. The ride to the Metropolitan Museum was quiet, both lost in thought. This would be their first public appearance as a married couple, their debut performance for New York's elite. Isabel twisted her wedding ring nervously. "They're going to want to know our story," she said. "How we met, why we married so quickly. We fell in love at first sight, couldn't wait." His tone was matter-of-fact, but she caught him glancing at her. "It happens." "Does it? To people like you?" "What do you mean, people like me?" "People who think love is a quarterly projection." "I don't." He stopped, considering. "Maybe I used to. Things change." The admission hung between them as their car pulled up to the museum's grand entrance, where photographers waited like hungry wolves. "Maximilian, over here!" The flashes were blinding as they walked the red carpet. Max's hand found the small of her back steady and warm, guiding her through the chaos. To the outside world, they looked perfect, the powerful businessman and his radiant wife, completely in love. If only they knew how complicated the truth was. "Mrs. Blackwood, how does it feel to be married to New York's most eligible bachelor?" Isabel smiled, leaning slightly into Max's side. "I think I'll have to ask his first wife about that." The reporters laughed, charmed. Max squeezed her waist almost imperceptibly. Approval or surprise, she couldn't tell. Inside the museum's grand hall, Manhattan's elite mingled beneath soaring arches and priceless art. Isabel had never seen so many diamonds in one place or felt so out of her element despite her designer gown. "Breathe," Max murmured in her ear. "They're just people with more money than sense." "Easy for you to say. You're one of them." "Am I?" His question was softer than she expected, tinged with something that might have been uncertainty. Before she could respond, a stunning blonde approached with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Max, darling." The woman air-kissed both his cheeks with practiced precision. "I heard the most interesting rumor about a secret wedding." "Vivian," Max's voice cooled noticeably. "Meet my wife, Isabel." "Isabel, this is Vivian Ashcroft." Vivian's green eyes assessed Isabel like a predator sizing up prey. "How quaint. And where did you two meet?" "I don't recall seeing Isabel at any of our usual events." The question was polite on the surface, poisonous underneath. Isabel felt every inadequacy. Her small-town background, her second-hand jewelry before Max, her complete ignorance of their social rules. "We met through business," Isabel said carefully. "Sometimes the best connections are unexpected." "Oh, what business are you in, dear?" The trap was elegant and obvious. Isabel could feel Max tense beside her, ready to intervene, but something rebellious sparked in her chest. "I specialize in restoration," she said sweetly. "Taking things that seem broken and finding their true value. It's remarkable what a little patience and care can accomplish." Vivian's smile faltered slightly. "How charitable of you. I prefer to think of it as practical. After all, the most beautiful treasures are often the ones people overlook." Max's hand found hers, squeezing gently. When she glanced at him, his eyes held something that looked suspiciously like pride. "Excuse us, Vivian," he said smoothly. "I promised to show Isabel the Renaissance collection." "That was masterful," Max said as they escaped to a quieter gallery. "Was it obvious I wanted to throw my champagne at her?" "Only to me." His voice held warmth she was still learning to recognize. "How did you know she was trying to humiliate you?" "I grew up in the South, Max. We invented polite cruelty." Isabel studied a marble sculpture, using it as an excuse to avoid his gaze. "Besides, I've had plenty of practice being looked down on." "What do you mean?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "The gallery I worked at in Savannah? I was engaged to the owner's son, Richard." The name came out bitter. "I thought we were planning a future together." Turns out he was planning a future with someone from the right family while having fun with the girl who wasn't good enough to take home. Max felt something dangerous stir in his chest, a protective fury that surprised him with its intensity. He was an idiot. He was practical, just like you. She turned to face him then, her eyes bright with unshed tears. The difference is, you were honest about what this is. The words hit him like a physical blow. Was that really how she saw him? As another man using her for convenience? Isabel, it's okay, Max. I know what I signed up for. Sometimes I forget when you look at me like that. Like what? Like I matter. The quiet admission hung between them in the hushed gallery. Max stared at this woman, his wife, who had somehow become essential to his daily happiness without him noticing, who made his sterile penthouse feel like home, who defended herself with grace and humor while believing she was nothing more than a business arrangement. You do matter, he said, his voice rougher than intended. Because I'm useful. Because you're you. The simple words seemed to shock them both. Isabel's lips parted slightly and Max realized they were standing closer than appropriate for a public space. Close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, close enough to count her freckles, close enough to forget this was supposed to be pretend. Max, there you are, a jovial voice boomed across the gallery. The mysterious newlyweds. They sprang apart as Theodore Blackwood, Max's uncle, approached with a wide grin and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Uncle Theodore. Max's professional mask snapped back into place. I didn't know you were in town. Flew in specially to meet the woman who finally tamed the untamable Max Blackwood. Theodore's gaze fixed on Isabel with calculating interest. Though I have to say, your marriage came as quite a surprise, almost like you were in a hurry. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Isabel felt Max tense beside her, understanding instinctively that this man was dangerous to whatever fragile thing was growing between them. When you know, she said lightly, slipping her hand into Max's. Sometimes the heart doesn't wait for convenient timing. Indeed. Theodore's smile never wavered. Well, I look forward to getting to know you better, my dear. Family is so important, don't you think? As Theodore Blackwood disappeared back into the crowd, Maximilian realized their marriage of convenience had just attracted the attention of the one person who could destroy everything, and for the first time he wasn't sure if he was more afraid of losing his inheritance or losing the woman who had become far more than a business partner. The argument started over coffee. You can't seriously be considering his dinner invitation, Max said, his voice tight with controlled frustration. Isabel looked up from the newspaper where Theodore's quote glowed like a neon warning. I'm eager to welcome my nephew's bride into the family properly. An intimate dinner seems perfect for getting acquainted. He's your uncle, Max. Refusing would look suspicious. Theodore doesn't do anything without an agenda. This isn't about welcoming you. It's about finding weaknesses. Then we don't give him any. She stood, moving to refill her coffee cup with deliberate calm. We go, we're convincing, and we leave. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Her voice carried an edge he'd never heard before. I understand that you think I'm not capable of handling your family's political games, that I'm some naive country girl who'll crumble under pressure. Max stared at her, recognizing his own fears reflected in her words. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? She turned to face him, hurt blazing in her eyes. For 3 weeks I've watched you wrestle with whether I'm an asset or a liability. Well, here's your chance to find out. The words hung between them like a gauntlet thrown down. Max felt something cold settle in his chest, the familiar armor of emotional distance. Fine, he said, his voice returning to the corporate chill she hadn't heard since their wedding day. We'll go. But when this backfires, don't say I didn't warn you. Isabel flinched as if he'd slapped her. There's the man I married. For a moment, I almost forgot this was just business. She walked out, leaving Max alone with his coffee and the terrible realization that he'd just hurt the one person who'd made him want to be better. Theodore's Tribeca penthouse was a study in old money elegance, antiques that had been in the family for generations, oil paintings of stern Blackwood ancestors, and an atmosphere thick with tradition and judgment. "Maximilian, Isabel!" Theodore greeted them with theatrical warmth. Come in, Martha has prepared something special." Max's hand found Isabel's back automatically, but she was rigid beneath his touch. They hadn't spoken since their fight, communicating only through Helena's careful scheduling and polite text messages. The dining room seated 12, but tonight only 4 places were set. Theodore's wife, Constance, was a thin woman with sharp eyes and a smile that never reached them. The 4th guest made Max's blood freeze. "You remember Marcus, don't you?" Theodore's tone was innocent, but his eyes glittered with malice. Marcus Blackwood rose from his seat with the lazy grace of a predator. Max's cousin was everything Augustus had despised: charming, ruthless, and completely without moral compass. Cousin Max. Marcus's smile was shark-like. "And the mysterious bride who swept you off your feet so..." Suddenly. The emphasis on the last word was deliberate. Isabel felt the tension radiating from Max like heat from a furnace, but his face remained perfectly composed. "Marcus." Max's acknowledgement was arctic. "I didn't realize you were in town." "Oh, I wouldn't miss the chance to meet the woman who accomplished the impossible, getting the great Maximilian Blackwood to believe in love." The dinner was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Theodore and Marcus took turns probing, each question designed to find cracks in their story. When did they first know they loved each other? Why such a small wedding? What were their plans for children? Isabel answered with grace. But Max could see the strain in the tight set of her shoulders, the careful way she chose each word. This was exactly what he'd tried to protect her from. "I have to say," Constance's voice cut through the conversation like ice, "it's refreshing to see Max with someone so down to earth." The insult was wrapped in compliment's clothing, but its target was clear. Isabel's smile never wavered. "I find authenticity is often undervalued in certain circles," she replied sweetly, "but the right person appreciates it." "Indeed." Marcus leaned forward, his smile predatory. "Tell me, Isabel, what did you think of Max's art collection when you first saw it?" The question was a trap. Max didn't have an art collection. Anyone who'd spent time in his penthouse would know that. Isabel's hesitation lasted only a heartbeat, but Marcus caught it. "Oh, did I say art collection? I meant wine collection, of course." "Of course." Isabel's voice was steady, but Max saw her hands tremble slightly. Max has exquisite taste in everything. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of careful conversation and landmine questions. By the time they reached coffee, Max felt like they'd survived a war. "Well," Theodore said, settling back with his brandy, "this has been illuminating. Though I have to say, Max, your grandfather would be fascinated by your romantic awakening." "My grandfather is dead," Max replied coldly. "But his wishes live on, don't they? That clause about marriage was quite specific." Theodore's eyes glittered dangerously. "1 year of wedded bliss living as husband and wife. I do hope you're both fulfilling the terms completely." The threat was unmistakable. Max felt Isabel stiffen beside him, understanding the implication. Theodore suspected their marriage was a sham, and he was positioning himself to contest the will if he could prove it. "We're very happy," Isabel said quietly. "Aren't we, darling?" She looked at Max then, and he saw something in her eyes that stopped his heart. Not fear or calculation, but genuine hurt. Hurt at his distance, his protection, his inability to trust her with his battles. "Blissfully," he managed, his voice rougher than intended. The ride home was suffocating. Isabel stared out the window while Max battled with words that wouldn't come. He wanted to apologize, to explain, to somehow undo the damage of the last few hours. "You were right," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "I wasn't prepared for that. For them." "Isabel?" "No, let me finish." She turned to face him, and he was devastated by the exhaustion in her eyes. I thought I understood what I'd signed up for, but I didn't. I thought I could handle being your convenient wife, but tonight made it clear how naive that was. You were magnificent tonight. You handled them better than most people who've known them for years. Did I? Because it felt like I was drowning and you... She took a shaky breath. You pulled away. The moment things got difficult, you went back to treating me like a liability instead of a partner. The accusation hit its mark because it was true. At the first sign of real danger, he'd retreated behind his walls, leaving her to face the wolves alone. I was trying to protect you. No, Max. You were trying to protect yourself. From me, from this, from the possibility that maybe I could be more than just a solution to your grandfather's ultimatum. They reached his building, but neither moved to get out. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they couldn't say. I can't do this anymore, Isabel whispered. Max's world tilted. What do you mean? I mean, I can't keep pretending this doesn't hurt. Pretending I don't care when you shut me out. Pretending this is just business when every day it feels more real. Isabel, please. I need some space. To think. To figure out if I can survive 10 more months of being married to someone who sees me as a beautiful mistake. She was out of the car before he could respond, leaving Max alone with the terrible understanding that he'd just lost the most important thing in his life, and he wasn't sure he knew how to fight for it. As Isabel disappeared into the elevator, Maximilian Blackwood sat in the back of his car and realized that in trying to protect his heart from his impossible wife, he'd forgotten the most important lesson his grandmother had taught him. Love without risk isn't love at all, it's just another business transaction. And he was about to lose the only deal that had ever truly mattered. Max hadn't slept in 3 days. Isabel had moved into the guest room, a distance of 30 feet that felt like an ocean. She was polite, cordial even, but the warmth that had transformed his sterile penthouse into a home was gone. They moved around each other like strangers, careful not to touch, not to hope. She's killing herself trying to pretend she's fine, Helena said, setting his morning coffee down with more force than necessary. Max looked up from the financial reports he'd been staring at without seeing. I don't recall asking for your opinion. And I don't recall caring. Helena's tone was sharper than he'd ever heard it. That woman saved you, Mr. Blackwood. Not just from your grandfather's will, but from yourself. And you're letting her slip away because you're too scared to admit you love her. I don't. You check your phone every 30 seconds hoping for a text from her. You haven't eaten a real meal since she stopped joining you for dinner. Yesterday I found you standing outside her door like a lost puppy. Helena's voice softened slightly. Sir, I've worked for you for 5 years. I've never seen you happy until she walked into your life. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Max pushed back from his desk, moving to the window where he and Isabel had shared their first real conversation. The memory felt like a knife twisting in his chest. It's not that simple. Love never is. But it's worth fighting for. And if I fight and lose? If I tell her how I feel and she still leaves? Helena's smile was infinitely gentle. Then at least you'll know you tried. But Mr. Blackwood, she's not going anywhere because she doesn't love you. She's leaving because she thinks you don't love her. That evening, Max found himself standing outside Isabel's door, his hand raised to knock. Through the thin wood he could hear her crying, soft, heartbroken sobs that destroyed what was left of his composure. He pushed the door open without permission. Isabel was curled on the window seat, still in her wedding dress from the photo shoot they'd endured that afternoon for a magazine spread. Her makeup was streaked, her carefully styled hair falling around her shoulders. She looked up when he entered, quickly wiping her tears. I'm sorry, she said, her voice thick. I know you can probably hear me. I'll try to be quieter. The fact that she was apologizing for crying, for being human, broke something fundamental in Max's chest. Don't, he said roughly. Don't apologize for feeling something. Rich, coming from you. The barb hit its mark, but he pressed on. You're right, about everything. I have been treating you like a liability instead of a partner. I have been protecting myself instead of protecting us. Isabel studied his face, searching for sincerity. Why are you telling me this? Because I can't lose you. You never had me, Max. Not really. Didn't I? He moved closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Then why does it feel like I'm dying every time you look at me like I'm a stranger? Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Because it hurts to love someone who sees you as a beautiful mistake. Is that what you think? He knelt beside the window seat, bringing himself to her eye level. That you're a mistake? Aren't I? You've made it clear this is temporary. A year-long inconvenience you'll be happy to divorce when it's over. Max reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. Isabel, you are many things. Stubborn, impossible, too brave for your own good. But you are not a mistake. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Don't. Her voice was broken. Don't say things you don't mean just to keep me compliant for the next 9 months. I mean every word. Prove it. The challenge hung between them. Max looked into her eyes, these brown eyes that had become his salvation, and made the most terrifying decision of his life. I love you. The words fell into the silence like stones into still water, creating ripples that changed everything. Isabel's breath caught, her eyes searching his face for deception or calculation. I love you, he repeated, stronger now. I love your laugh and your stubborn streak and the way you make my chef feel like family. I love that you see the best in people even when they don't deserve it. I love that you chose me when you could have chosen anyone else. Max, I love you so much it terrifies me, he continued, the words pouring out like a dam breaking. And I know I've been a coward keeping you at arm's length because loving you means risking everything. But losing you, that would be the real catastrophe. Isabel was fully crying now, but her hands came up to cover his where they framed her face. You love me? Desperately, completely, forever if you'll let me? Even though I'm not good enough for your world? You're too good for it. You're too good for me. But I'm selfish enough to want you anyway. She kissed him then, soft and salt-sweet with tears, and Max felt his world reorient around this moment. This woman, this impossible love that had saved him from himself. When they broke apart, Isabel rested her forehead against his. I love you too, she whispered. Even when you're being an arrogant, overprotective idiot. Especially then. Especially then. Max pulled her closer, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. What happens now? Now we figure out how to be married for real. Not for your grandfather's will, not for my financial problems, but because we choose each other. Every day. Every day. They held each other as the city sparkled outside the window, two people who had found love in the most unlikely place. A marriage of convenience that had become inconveniently real. Max? Tomorrow, when Theodore tries to prove we're not really married. Max's arms tightened around her. Let him try. He won't find anything fake about the way I love you. Promise me something. Anything. Don't protect me from your battles anymore. We're partners now, in everything. Max thought of his grandmother's words about choosing each other every day, about love being worth the risk. Looking at Isabel, his wife, his heart, his home, he finally understood. Partners, he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted like forever. Outside, Manhattan glittered with possibility. Witness to the moment a marriage of convenience became a love story for the ages, one that neither time nor scheming relatives could ever undo. 6 months later, as Maximilian and Isabel Blackwood celebrated their first real wedding anniversary, they would look back on this night as the moment their impossible love became inevitable. And Theodore Blackwood, finding no evidence of deception in a marriage built on genuine devotion, would finally admit defeat, unable to contest a union that had become unshakably, inconveniently, perfectly real.